Hello there and welcome back to the Net Report. Chris here, and today I am here to discuss the craziness that was the NBA Semifinals. We had all 4 series go to at least 6 games, and we had some very crazy matchups, competitive series, a couple upsets, which overall led to some great basketball. Starting off with perhaps the most anticipated series in a long time in Lakers versus Warriors. This of course had all the narratives and media buzz around it. We got to see Curry versus LeBron again. It's the first time we've seen them go head to head against each other since the 2018 finals, and this time it felt like it was on a much more level playing field, leading to a more exciting matchup. And in a pretty decent shocker, at least to me and a lot of NBA fans, the Lakers were able to pull this off and win in 6 despite being the underdogs before this series started. And to me, the Lakers were able to win this series due to 2 big factors, the first being the incredible defense they played on the Warriors, specifically the perimeter defense on Curry and the rest of Golden State, and the interior presence of Anthony Davis. Going into the series, my biggest question was who was going to guard Curry and keep Golden State's guards from scoring, and boy did they ever answer that question. Dennis Schroeder was incredible in his hustle, constantly chasing Curry around, making it difficult for him to get to his spots, constantly fighting over screens and making the right switches on defense. Guys like Rui and Reeves were able to play pretty good help defense as well, and keeping up with the likes of Thompson and Poole, making their lives difficult. Even guys like Lonnie Walker and Austin Reeves never felt like true negatives on the defensive end of the floor. And while all this was happening on the perimeter, Anthony Davis has been a monster in the paint, having multiple 3 and 4 block games, constantly making it hard for the Warriors to drive at the rim, which has resulted in them settling for a lot of jump shots. He's done a great job at defending without fouling, along with the rest of the Lakers squad, and the defense as a whole has just been incredible for the Lakers, which was not something we expected going into the series against a very loaded Warriors offense. The second point I wanted to bring up was the role players stepping up for the Lakers throughout the series. You seem to have a different player go off every game. You had D'Lo go off in Game 3, you had the Lonnie Walker game in Game 4 in which he dropped 15 points in the 4th quarter. Austin Reeves overall had a great series. The Lakers supporting cast overall just completely outplayed the Warriors supporting cast, which was not something we expected going into this series. The Lakers supporting cast stepping up combined with LeBron and AD's consistency was paramount to winning this series. Despite some inconsistent play from Anthony Davis at the start of the series, and LeBron not going full LeBron mode in the beginning of the series, this Lakers squad and its supporting cast was able to lift this team and get them this series win over the Warriors, which was just the biggest surprising factor for me in this series. And perhaps some good news going forward, Anthony Davis towards the end of the series was playing very consistently. If he can bring that towards the Denver series, that will be huge for them. And LeBron James in Game 7 finally looked like the best player on the court. He was matchup hunting, getting small guys like Jordan Poole and Gary Payton switched onto him, driving to the rim, and overall he just looked like LeBron James again. And that will be huge going forward into the Denver series. If he's able to play at this level, this Lakers team has a true chance to compete for a title. As for the Warriors, Curry was excellent, but aside from him, there was just too much inconsistency throughout the whole team. Klay was great some games, but he was awful in Game 6 particularly, shooting 3 for 19. Jordan Poole was so bad offensively, he was just unplayable at certain times due to his poor defense outweighing his offensive struggles, and if Jordan Poole's not on, it's not worth having him out on the court. I wouldn't go as far as to say the dynasty is over for the Warriors. I definitely think they can still be competitive for the next few years, especially with Curry at the helm, but it was just disappointing to see many of their players not play up to standard, and it really felt like the inverse of previous series when LeBron faced these Warriors teams, where LeBron seemed like he didn't have the help he needed, and this time it felt like Curry didn't have the help he needed. Overall, it was just rough for the Warriors. This series wasn't the 7-game series we wanted or expected, but it still had moments that stuck out and made for a great series. Hopefully, this isn't the last time we see Curry versus LeBron in the playoffs, because every time we see these two square off in the playoffs, it has the potential to be a historic matchup. Moving on to the other Western Conference matchup, we had the Suns versus the Nuggets. The Nuggets, of course, winning this one in 6, and Nikola Jokic was overall just incredible in this series. He averaged an insane 34.5 points per game on insane efficiency. almost 60% from the field and 44% from 3. He also had 10.3 assists per game and 13.2 rebounds per game this series, meaning he averaged a triple-double, which is just insane. You had other players step up, and Jamal Murray averaging almost 25 points per game. Players like Bruce Brown providing valuable bench minutes, having 25 points per game off the bench in a crucial Game 5. And overall, nobody on their team had a particularly bad series. Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., they all played their roles while helping this Nuggets team play winning basketball on the biggest stage. This Nuggets team shows us how great they can be when they're healthy. After 2 years of just constant injuries, they're finally healthy, and sure enough, they're back in the Western Conference Finals for the first time since 2020 when they had a fully healthy squad. As for the Suns, the story for them this series was the lack of depth and unfortunate luck with CP3 and his injuries. Once CP3 went down, it was rough looking at this Suns roster outside of Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. It felt at times their third best player was either Cameron Payne or Landry Shamet, which is not a good recipe for success. DeAndre Ayton was abysmal this series. He didn't have a game this series in which he scored more than 14 points and was super passive this series and looked mentally checked out. He was at times being outplayed by Jock Landale in terms of hustle and drive, which is just not okay for someone who was a former #1 overall pick. The Phoenix Suns really needed DeAndre Ayton to step up, with CP3 being out and their depth being super thin, and he did not step up, and the Suns were hurting really bad because of it. For someone who's supposed to be arguably their third best player, DeAndre Ayton was such a disappointment this series, and at the end of the series you saw him laughing on the bench, smiling while they were down 30 points. It was overall just a bad look in general, and now there's so many question marks about his future in Phoenix, and overall just a bad look for Ayton. For the Suns to somehow win this series, they were going to need superhuman efforts from Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, which they did get in games 3 and 4, especially with Devin Booker, who was excellent every game of the series outside of Game 6. However, the task was too tall for them to be able to carry this team to a series win against a very great Denver Nuggets team. Going forward, the Suns will really need to look at adding depth to help Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, but shout out to the Nuggets for playing a great series. Oh, and by the way, the Suns firing Monty Williams, an absolutely awful decision. We'll talk more about that on our podcast later this week, so if you're interested in hearing about that, consider subscribing and be on the lookout for our pod. Moving on to the Knicks versus Heat. The Heat pull off the upset again and continue their Cinderella run as an 8th seed, beating the Knicks in 6. And the Heat once again win this series with great defense and timely scoring from unlikely heroes. Jimmy Butler was magnificent again this series, averaging 25 points per game in a very hard-fought, defensive-oriented series. Bam Adebayo was also magnificent, both offensively and defensively. If your name wasn't Jalen Brunson, you were not scoring on the inside against Bam Adebayo. The Heat, while not shooting particularly great from 3 this series, always seemed to hit timely 3 after 3. The likes of Cody Martin, Max Strus, and Gabe Vincent would hit clutch shots that would either put games away or stop a major run, and this was huge to help win the series against a Knicks team that really struggled offensively, partly due to Miami's great defense. Miami keeps proving us doubters wrong and have shown they mean business these playoffs. Jimmy Butler has completely willed this team forward throughout these playoffs, and the Miami Heat are now the second team in NBA history to make it to the conference finals as an 8th seed. Who knows if there's more magic left in this run, and it wouldn't surprise me if Jimmy Butler keeps willing this team further and further throughout the playoffs. As for the Knicks, despite a great and unexpected season, it has to feel like a little bit of a disappointment going out this way. First off, I want to shout out Jalen Brunson for just an incredible series, 41 points in Game 7, played his absolute heart out. He deserves all the love and praise despite the loss. Unfortunately, outside of Brunson though, a lot of Knicks had rough series, the biggest culprit being Julius Randle. Randle shot 41% from the field for the series, with his worst night being 3 for 14 in a must-win Game 6. Randle continuously slows down the Knicks offense with his isolation plays, and against good defenses like the Heat, it gets exposed with him having to settle for multiple low percentage jump shots, which hurts the Knicks offense tremendously. The Knicks have to build from this season despite the disappointing loss. They still have players like Josh Hart and RJ Barrett who showed flashes of how good they can be throughout the playoffs. They just need more time to put it together and be more consistent. Who knows if Randall will be back with the Knicks next season or if they move on, but if you're a Knicks fan, there is still much optimism for the future. Your team made a deep playoff run for the first time in what feels like ages, and overall they look set up nicely for the future. And lastly, the Boston Celtics defeat the Philadelphia 76ers in a Game 7 blowout win. The Boston Celtics had a very shaky start to the series, losing the first game in which the 76ers did not have Joel Embiid, and James Harden went completely off in that game. The Celtics eventually fell down in the series 3-2, but they seemed to absolutely dominate after the first half of Game 6. Jason Tatum was under heavy criticism throughout the series after having a rough stretch, being rather inefficient from the field, but when the Celtics needed him most, he sure came through. After a horrific start to Game 6, starting 1 for 14 from the field, he completely turned it around with 16 points in the fourth quarter, then followed it up with a ridiculous 51-point game in Game 7, setting the all-time record for most points in a Game 7. Al Horford and Robert Williams played amazing defense on Embiid in Game 7, and the Celtics just ran away with the game in the third quarter, going on a ridiculous run. The Celtics are such a well-rounded team and show that coming back to beat Philly with everyone from Jaylen Brown, Horford, Brogdon all playing their roles to a perfect tee, and overall this Boston team just continues to play great and will have a chance to make it to the finals facing the Heat. As for the 76ers, this was a horrific choke job. They were up 3-2 and had a real chance to close this series out in 6, but let the Celtics run away with Game 6 in the 4th because nobody could score and they let Tatum go off. The constant theme of this team is the inconsistencies of James Harden and players like Tobias Harris not showing up. For every good game that Harden had this series, it felt like he had 2 bad games, and in a crucial Game 6 and 7, he shot 4 for 16 and 3 for 11, which is just unacceptable for what's supposed to be your second best player and a star on your team. Doc Rivers blows another 3-2 series lead again, and one has to wonder if he'll be back as the 76ers coach next season. Although to be fair, I don't fully blame this loss on him because there comes a point where your star players, they have to play like star players and your supporting pieces have to help, and the 76ers did not get that, especially in Game 6 and 7. Overall, a very disappointing end to the 76ers season. Joel Embiid and James Harden did not show up in Game 7 and they really struggled from the field, and just a very anticlimactic end into what was otherwise a crazy series. Overall, the semifinals were very entertaining with very great matchups and some shocking results. Let me know in the comments your favorite moment from the semifinals and if you were surprised by any of the results. Thank you for watching. We will be posting NBA content throughout the playoffs, so if you're interested in these types of videos, please consider subscribing. Thanks once again for tuning in and take care.